Hi guys, welcome to Seminar 8 of the AGECS Reconciliation Series. Before I do start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong, who are the traditional custodians of the lands that AGECS is located on. We'd also like to acknowledge the Aboriginal language groups across all of Victoria, whose lands AGECS provides specific funding projects around early childhood education. I'd also like to acknowledge any other Aboriginal people that have turned up to watch this seminar. So a little bit about me. My name is AJ Williams. My background is Radri and Watchabullock. I own my own company called Girraway Ganyi Consultancy, and Girraway Ganyi is named after my two kids. The first son called Girraway, and a boy and Radri, and a daughter called Ganyi in Watchabullock language. I'm a nurse, I'm a youth worker, cultural facilitator and mentor. I'm a cultural advisor to a number of organisations like the Butterfly Foundation, the Australian New Zealand Eating Disorder Collaborative, Independent Schools Victoria, AGECS, Cancer Council Victoria, Wesley College, Scots College, Campbell Grammar, and Brighton Grammar. I'm a mental health first aid instructor, and I'm also the moderator for the seminar series that you're watching at the moment. And I'm currently the 2021 AASW Social Worker of the Year. So that's me in a bit of a nutshell. But today, this presentation is looking at the most commonly asked questions that I get in cultural awareness trainings that I actually do. And so I've got some friends popping in to actually help answer some of those questions with me. So one of the first questions is, what is the difference between a welcome to country and an acknowledgement of country? So I've got one of my friends to actually have a little bit of chat.
G'day, I'm Preston Johnson. I'll be telling you 5 facts about welcome to country. Fact 1. A welcome to country is a ritual or cultural practice performed at many events held in Australia, intended to highlight the cultural significance of a surrounding area in a particular Aboriginal clan or language group. Fact 2. The welcome must be performed by a recognised elder or traditional custodian of the representative land. Fact 3. Welcome to countries are sometimes accompanied by other traditional practices such as smoking ceremonies, music, or dances. Fact 5. A typical acknowledgement would be something like this. I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we are meeting. I pay respects to the elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities or may have been here too.
So I thank Preston for sharing that little video with us. So a welcome to country can only be done by traditional owners of the land that you're on. A welcome to country can be done by anyone, Aboriginal or non-Indigenous person. It's about recognising the significance of the land to the traditional owners and your place within it. So what do I say if I'm going to do an acknowledgement country? And I like little Preston's little example there. It's really about thinking about something simple to start off with. So something like, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are meeting on today, and I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. It doesn't have to be any more than that to start off with, because what you need to do is learn to say it without kind of reading it. And I know it can be a little bit difficult and a bit tricky at first, but it does take practice. And once you can actually get that rolling off your tongue, then you can kind of be a bit creative with it. So then you could actually say something like, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're currently meeting on, the people of the Wurundjeri. I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. And I'd like to extend that to lands where you're currently on now. And I pay respect to your elders past, present, and for those who shaped you to become who you are today. But sometimes trying to be too creative at the beginning is what often scares people. So my advice is just to try to keep it as simple as possible, then start to get creative with it. Another question I get asked all the time is, how many Aboriginal nations are there? Well, if you look at this huge map, there are around 260 distinct language groups with about 500 dialects. And you can kind of see that the language groups are very geographically bound. So for my people here, which are Wiradjuri, my family come from Wellington Dubbo out this direction. And the other part of my family is, I've got a Watchabullock background, which comes out around Washington Bulla, down in this little area down here. And this is a great map to get Aboriginal students, Aboriginal young people, to kind of show others where exactly their language group is, if they know it. But it's also a good map to actually get people to identify, and their families to identify, if they weren't born on country right now, to actually have an idea of where they might have grown up, or where they might have actually, their parents might have lived, and getting a better perspective of how big and how wide and how diverse the Aboriginal communities actually are. And these maps you can get from a map shop as well. So one other question that often gets asked is, what is the Kulin Nation? And if you're in the Melbourne area, you have to know what the Kulin Nation is. And the Kulin Nation are the 5 language groups around the Melbourne area. They are the Dja-Dja-Wurrung, the Twonarong, the Wathaurong, the Woiwurrung, and the Bunurong. And the word "rong" at the end means language. So this is a language group map. If you're wondering what happened to the Wurundjeri people spoke Woiwurrung, which is why it's a language map. That's why it's written in language, but the Wurundjeri people are there. You can actually see that the Bunurong people are around the bay, often identified as like maybe the upside down kangaroo. You kind of have a look, the little head and the little hands and the pouch and little legs there. Right next to Wurundjeri, you've got Wathaurong, which goes down towards Geelong. Next to Wathaurong, you're actually going over the Gunditjmara country. On the other side of Woiwurrung and Bunurong and Twonarong, you've got the Gurnai people. Up north, you've got the Yorta people, and my people over here, the Watchabullock. That kind of gives you a little bit of an understanding that the Kulin Nation is made up of the 5 language groups around the Melbourne area, and together they make up the Kulin Nation, or sometimes known as the Kulin Alliance. Another question that often gets asked is, how do you define Aboriginality? Well, I'm going to get Auntie Eva Jo to explain what Aboriginality means to her.
How do you define Aboriginality?
I define that Aboriginality and me as an Aboriginal person, what I feel inside, what my connections are. You know, I for many years, I've been here in Melbourne since I was 5. And my connection to country here is probably my strongest, even though I am from Southeast Australia. So I think it's not about the colour of our skin. It's not about the colour of our eyes and the colour of our hair. Aboriginality is something that we feel. You know, it's something that we just know, no matter how much we may have been, you know, institutionalised and not told that we're Aboriginal. I don't speak my language. I'm shattered that I don't speak my language, you know, and fluently. So I have children that have blue eyes and green eyes and brown eyes, and I have grandchildren that have my blonde hair and blue eyes, and that does not make my grandchildren or my children any less Aboriginal than I am. You know, I think throughout you know, throughout society, throughout history, we know that Victoria was the first colonised, you know. So Aboriginality is something that you feel. It's not something how I look.
Sani Eva Joe talks a bit about the connection to community, connection to family, connection to country, the feeling that's inside. And it's definitely not about skin colour. But is there a legal definition of being Aboriginal in Australia? And the answer is yes. There's always been legislation around Aboriginal people. And under the Aborigines Protection Acts of the past, they were actually legal definitions like Aborigines, full bloods, half castes, quarter castes, 1/16. And those words kind of ceased operation after the 1967 referendum. And currently our legal definition is this three-pointed definition, which is to be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander is a person of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent, identifies as being Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, and is accepted in such in the community in which he or she lives. It is a three-pointed definition, so you do need the whole 3 points. There can be a little bit of debate about how this act, how this wording can get played out at times. It isn't easy to meet these three definitions at times. If you're members of the Solomon generation, you may not know who your ancestors are, so you're having trouble with descent. And you might always not be recognised in the community in which he or she actually lives. And the second point means that I can also identify at times not to be Aboriginal if I don't feel culturally safe. But that is the current legal definition. You have to be a descendant, you have to self-identify, and the community in which you live in has to accept you. So the next thing is a little bit about what do the colours and symbols mean on the Aboriginal flag. So we've got young Maurice. He's talking to you about 5 facts about the Aboriginal flag. Here's Maurice.
Hi, my name is Maurice Saviri, and I'm doing facts about the Aboriginal flag. The Aboriginal flag was designed in 1971 by Aboriginal artist Harold Thomas, who is a Labrador man from Central Australia. It was created as a symbol of unity and national identity for Aboriginal people during the land rights movement in the early 1970s. The symbolic meaning of the flag colours are black, represents the Aboriginal skin colour. The yellow circle represents the sun. Red represents the sands and the land of Australia. The copyright of the flag is held by Harold Thomas.
So since the video was recorded, I just want to add now the copyright of the flag actually belongs to the federal government who purchased the flag in 2021. But I want to thank Maurice for sharing that with us. So another question we often get asked is what do the colours and symbols mean on the Torres Strait Islander flag? So we've had young Noah actually talk to you a little bit about what the colours and symbols actually mean. And there's the flag, but here is Noah.
My name is Noah, and this is 5 facts about the Torres Strait Islander flag. Fact 1. The Torres Strait Islander flag was designed in 1992 by Bernard Nomok. Fact 2. The flag was chosen from over 100 entries in an art competition organised in January 1992 by the island's coordinating council. Fact 3. The signs and symbols of the flag are the green panels at the top and bottom of the flag symbolise the land, while the blue panel in the centre represents the water of the Torres Strait. The thin black stripes between the green and the blue panels signify the Torres Strait Islanders themselves. The white 5-pointed star at the centre of the flag represents the 5 major island groups: the Western, Eastern, Central, Port Kennedy and Mainland. and the white dari, dancer's headdress, also, around it also symbolises the Torres Strait Islanders people. White symbolises peace and harmony, while the star is a symbol for navigation. Fact 4. It wasn't until July 1995 that the Torres Strait Island flag was recognised by the Australian government as an official flag of Australia. This was through the Flag Act 1953. Fact 5. Although you don't need permission to fly the Torres Strait Islander flag, you do need permission to reproduce it for commercial purposes.
So that was young Noah, and I thank Noah for actually kind of explaining to us the colours and symbols of the flag. So a bit of a question here is, what makes a good ally? Well, one of my friends, Summer Finlay, has written an article, How to Be a Good Ally, and there's a bit of a link there for you to actually load down her little document. But she lists these 7 things, and the first one is to, 1, always preface our voices. Aboriginal voices haven't always been able to tell Aboriginal stories, and it's often our stories have been told to non-Indigenous people who then retell them on our behalf, and sometimes whitenize them a little bit in order to not exactly share the true history. We also need to remember that it was only a couple of NAIDOC themes ago that the theme was listen to our stories. 2, sometimes be okay and not being part of the conversation. It's about giving Aboriginal people the platform to talk, but not always talking on behalf or for Aboriginal people. 3, Summer talks a bit about being there for the good times and the bad. 4, say something when you hear someone say inappropriate things about Aboriginal people. Those terms that often get called like Abo and Coon, we still hear them on a daily basis, or those percentages that you're only a half caste. It's really important that you understand what those words are and do stand up and say something when other people actually use those words. 5, it's about don't take it personally when we don't agree with you. But if you want to hear Aboriginal voices, and you might hear a diversity of those voices, it's really important to actually stop and listen. 6, don't go it alone. It's about working with us. It's about supporting us. It's about empowering us to be able to actually have a say in all levels of the decision-making process. And the last one is 7, understand that Aboriginal people are not all the same. As highlighted in that big map that we had before, there are over 500 different nations and many language groups that do exist, that different Aboriginal people will share with you their different experiences and sometimes give you different opinions on questions that you actually ask. And no one's actually right or wrong. It's about being able to incorporate some of those into actual practice. Another question there is, what is the dream time? And young Jamara, Newell Hagan, he's got this to say.
G'day, Jamara here. I'm just here to give you 5 facts about the dream time and dream. Fact 1. The dream time is a period in which life was created. It was called different names by different Aboriginal language groups. Generally speaking, the dream time explains how much the natural world was created, such as animals, trees, plants, hills, rocks, spiritual beings, and ancestors. These creation stories are the basis of the Aboriginal law and culture. Fact 2. The dreaming should not be seen as a state or a linear. It is about the past and the present and our future. It is a timeless concept. This means that the dream is either before the life of the individual begins and continues to exist when the life of the individual ends. Fact 3. Each community have their own dream time stories. Themes are often consistent with each other.
2-1.
Fact 4. Dreaming stories command the rules of how we fit in and live in society in the present. It tells us how and why certain things happen. it carries out certain practices and how it relates to the world around us. Fact 5. Dreamtime or creation stories are passed through generations by generation, through the world of the mouth symbols, dances, songs, and stories, and also through ceremonies.
So thanks, Jamara, for that. So Jamara was actually just explaining that the Dreamtime is a place that Aboriginal people hold dear. It is a place that we can't always see, but we know that it exists. It's where our stories originate from. It's where we originate from. It's where we go when we pass away. Dreamtime stories, though, are not just stories, and they're not just Aboriginal fairy tales. They're stories that tell us how the world was created. They're stories that also tell us how we're supposed to live our lives today. So if you are reading kids' Dreamtime stories, please acknowledge a couple of things. 1, it's not a fairy tale. 2, that the Dreamtime stories often tell of how the world was created from a perspective of that particular language group. So it's important to acknowledge the language group of whose story that you're actually sharing. And 3, that there are always morals of the story. So if you are sharing the story, then sit back and ask the kids that you're working with, what did they learn from that story? And as a facilitator or a trainer or an educator, it's also about you looking at what morals do you want the kids to actually learn from these stories. So another question that often gets asked is, what is the population of Indigenous people in Australia? And these stats are a little bit updated more than when we did the first webinar. So we've actually got a bit more data from census now. So according to the 2021 census, it's an estimated to be about 881,600 Indigenous people, or people that actually tick the box. From that figure, 91.4 identify as being Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, 4.2% identify as being Torres Strait Islander, and 4.4 identifies both being Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. It's estimated that the Indigenous population will be around 1.1 million by 2031. Every census that we've had since 1967, there's been about 40,000 people that actually identify at the following census. So what is actually the population of Indigenous people in Victoria? Well, in Victoria, according to the ABS article that I've linked down there, is it 66,000. Now, I'm pretty sure it's a round up figure, guys. But in Victoria, 60,000 people identified as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander in 2021, which equates to about 1% of the state population. Among the Indigenous Australian population in Victoria, 94.2 identified as being Aboriginal origin, 3.2 identified as being of Torres Strait Islander origin, and 2.6 identified themselves as both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. So I've used a few different terms. I've used Indigenous, I've used Aboriginal, and there are some other terms that get used. But Dr. Summer Finlay, who we just sort of looked at her allyship paper before, with permission, she's allowed me to play this clip where she talks a little bit about some appropriate language. So here's Summer.
Hi, my name's Summer May Finlay. I'm a Yorta Yorta woman, PhD candidate, and also a public health practitioner. Look, I just wanted to have a yarn with you today about how to actually refer to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. There are so many people that are getting it wrong, and I constantly feel like I'm having to explain to people what's appropriate and what's not and why. So I thought maybe this would be a really quick way of doing it And this way I can refer people to this video. Hi, here you are. And I don't have to keep explaining myself because it's quite tiring, exhausting, and takes up quite a lot of my time. So I'm going to start by prefacing this with that we know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples around the country like to be called different things. So this is not going to necessarily suit everybody, but what this will do is hopefully get you to have a bit of an understanding about what's clearly not appropriate. And the other thing that I want to say to you is that when working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, always ask them how they'd like to be referred to. Just to put it into perspective for you, say your name's Samantha, but I decide I don't really like Samantha, it's too long, I'm going to use the word Jane, so I'm going to call you Jane from now on. Not sure that would go down so well now, would it? So, keep that in mind when you're wondering why we actually get quite funny about what we're called. So let's start with the big ticket item. Do not call us Abos. It is an offensive term, has negative connotations. Do not use the excuse that it's an abbreviation because that is unacceptable. I'm sure you don't use that excuse and I'm sure you don't use the word, but I just wanted to point that out. Now, the other thing is that the word Indigenous. Now, we don't mind that word, a lot of us. Some of us like it, some of us don't. But what we really all agree on is that if you're going to actually use the word Indigenous, you have to capitalise it. We are a proper noun. Capitalise it. Media outlets, capitalise it. Have some respect for us as proper nouns. We are people with distinct cultures, and we actually feel like if you're going to capitalise Australia, well, as First Nations peoples, we want to be capitalised as well. So thank you in advance for changing your style, guys. Now, you would have heard me refer to myself as a Yorta Yorta woman. That is my mob. So that's my country. That's where my family is from, and that's where my ancestors are from. So when you're actually referring to distinct groups of people and you actually know the country, it's actually a really good idea to use that term. Now, if you don't know the term and you're referring to mainland Australian people, First Nations people, you could actually use the word Aboriginal, but that doesn't include Torres Strait Islanders. So what you actually need to do is refer to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders if you're referring to all First Nations peoples under what is now called Australia. So I know it's really long, but Torres Strait Islanders are a distinct culture. They really do have their own title, and that is what they prefer. So let's be mindful of that and actually make sure we use Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. Now, while we're on that, I know that some of you like to use the word ATSI. And can I just say, it's not actually a word, it's an acronym. It is not appropriate. I know it's long. I don't use the word ATSI, so I think that you can avoid it too. That goes for tweeters too. I know that you value your 140 characters, but please get creative because it is actually offensive to use ATSI. So really that's me summing up. I just wanted to say thank you for watching all of this if you managed to get through it. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know that a lot of other Aboriginal people will as well. And I think that moving forward, if we really are to genuinely respect both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as well as the rest of Australia, we need to be naming each other appropriately. So thank you, and I'm sure I'll talk to you again soon.
And I thank Summer for letting us play that video. I hope that's made you kind of think a little bit. These words on the screen are just there as be careful words. They're not that you can't use them, or some, as she said, yes, are not appropriate, like Abo, Bung, Coon, and Atsi. Indigenous, used as a collective, talk about the Indigenous population, but don't often identify a person as being Indigenous. But some people do like to be called First Nations people. The only one I have a little bit of an issue with is First Australians, because, growing up in my narrative, those First Australians that I was taught at school were the white people that arrived on the ships. But again, that's a little bit of my issue there. Black fellas, Aboriginal people may use them between themselves. Not always appropriate to use those terms back at them. And the word Koori kind of means Southeastern Australian. So you can't just presume every Aboriginal person that's in Victoria at the moment are Koori. And if you do say, look, are you Koori? And they're not, they'll go, I'm Murray, which is telling you from North Queensland. or I'm Palawa, I'm from South Australia. So again, as some have kind of said, it's really important to understand what these words are, how they may have impact on people, and to always clarify exactly how Aboriginal people would prefer to be called. So another question I often get asked is, what is an elder? And Auntie Leanne Sumner, I think, sums it up really well. So here's Auntie Leanne.
So how do you find an elder in community?
I think an elder is elected by community. I think it's about the community saying to you, you know, you've done the Aboriginal way of things, you've supported the community, and so they, you know, acknowledge that with you by calling you auntie. And so I don't believe that suddenly you turn 50 and you're an elder. I believe it's about the community deciding that you've done what they feel is beneficial to the community, and so they, you know, acknowledge that by calling you an elder, calling you auntie, giving you that respect.
So there's elders in the families, and they're people that can speak on behalf of the family, and there's elders in community that speak on behalf of community. So another question that often gets asked is, has the number increased of Indigenous children attending early childhood services? Now, one of the current Close the Gap strategies is, by 2025, increase the proportion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children enrolled in prep before full-time schooling in early childhood education to 95%. We actually have to say that nationally in 2021, 96.7% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are currently near the year before full-time schooling. Age cohort, it's a very wordy one, they are currently enrolled in preschool programs. That has been a huge increase in the number of years. So another question is, how can we start hearing true Aboriginal stories? And that is by asking people and talking to as many Aboriginal people as you possibly can. One thing that I do for truth telling is I provide a platform for Aboriginal people to share their voices. And through this reconciliation series, you can see how I've invited Aboriginal organisations and Aboriginal people to share their experiences. But I do this in my own life as well. The videos that you have seen are all on the Girraway Ganyi YouTube, which, just a bit of self-promotion at the end, is my YouTube channel. It has got, I screenshotted this a while ago, which had 271 subscribers, but it's got 450 something now. So please join. You might get a prize when you get to the 500. But it does actually have the elder stories on there. It does have younger people's stories, where over a couple of years, we've interviewed the kids periodically over a 2-year period, and put together a clip about them sharing their own experiences about being an Aboriginal kid in 2020 and 2021. The videos were made. We've got the fact vaults, which are those short vaults the Aboriginal kids actually wrote themselves, scripted, and my son and I edited them to put up in there. They're those little 5 facts or 4 fact vaults. And there are also some myth bustings that are actually going on in the elder shorts and in some of the other kids' stories. Easiest way to navigate the storytelling is actually go to, as you can see, this is actually another one. We only had 155 subscribers. Is actually go to playlists, and the playlist will come up. Playlist 1 looks at elder stories, so there's 5 elder stories there. Playlist 2 is the elder shorts, which were the short clips the elders actually were sharing different concepts. Playlist 3 with the quick fact files, which were the 5 facts activities. There's about 28 or 29 of them. And I've been doing some mentoring programs in schools. So as I said, the recording of the Aboriginal kids with permission of their family, and all the Aboriginal people got paid as well for their stories. So playlist 9 is Woodley School, playlist 10 is Scots College, and playlist 11 is Camberwell Grammar. If you're looking at series 4 and 5 there, there's 18 Aboriginal workers that share their experiences and share strategies and tips about working with Aboriginal people. And there's 10, I think there's probably a little bit more now, I think there's 12 or 15 workers that are non-Indigenous that also share their experiences of working with Aboriginal people as well, to give you more strategies of actually working with Aboriginal people. And I must say, I'm very lucky that in 2021, the YouTube channel actually was awarded the Heart Awards, a highly commended award for the YouTube and telling of the stories. So please, if you get a chance, this is a really good place to actually look at some stories from Aboriginal people. And I'm always updating and I'm always interviewing new stories. I've probably got another 50 or 55 videos to upload in the next year. So it's always continually updating. That's about all the time we've got for. So I do want to say once again, thank you for tuning in. I actually want to thank Dr. Summer Finlay, Auntie Leanne Sumner, Auntie Eva Joe, Preston, Maurice, and Noah for their stories that we actually heard. And in my language, we actually say Mandang Girraway, which means I'll see you guys later. Okay, bye.